I said I'd be back with another video. I also know I said that about 4.5 months ago, so hi! I'm waving right now. I'm actually waving like you can see me doing it. So what's infused a burning desire to make content again? Well, it's funny you should say burning, because, well, okay, if you've clicked on the video, you know exactly what it is. It's why you're here. It's the new DLC for Horizon Forbidden West. It's Burning Shores. See what I did there? With the puns? Look, it's been 4 months, I'm rusty. So where do I start? I dare say some people would like me to start with the fact that yes, I do like the Horizon series. Enough so to review the DLC. Look, I was late to the party on this one. I didn't play Zero Dawn until after Forbidden West came out, and despite liking the game, the only reason I ended up sitting down and giving my full attention to Forbidden West was because I wasn't well and didn't have a choice but to just sit. It's been a wild 4 months for me. Look, here's my whistle-stop review of Forbidden West. It was an overall improvement over Zero Dawn, especially when it came to the game mechanics. There were still some issues. The climbing was a million times better this time around, but was still the most frustrating thing in the world. The melee combat was opened up, but was a bit of a mess in my opinion. Did anybody really use it outside of the melee pits? The story went absolutely mental, and skewed off into this huge science fiction heavy tale, which, it spun my head a bit when the Zeniths appeared, but it was interesting enough, and they introduced characters I like. Beta, they introduced Beta, and I think for Aloy's personal development, I think she was a good addition. Okay, that enough? Right, I'll move on to Burning Shores. There will be spoilers, probably more towards the second half of the video, but I may touch on things earlier, so if you don't want to be spoiled at all, now is maybe the time to dip out. I'll see you again in probably another 4 months. So first thing to say, Burning Shores is a PS5 only DLC. If you played the base game on the PS4, you are totally out of luck here. Developers Guerrilla have said it's because the hardware of the PlayStation 5 leads to a more immersive experience for players, and I get it. Visually, there's a lot going on. It's a visually stunning game. There's no question about that. But if I was on previous gen hardware, I'd probably be a bit annoyed. However, seeing what they've done here visually, seeing the detail and scope both on the ground and in the sky, you have to wonder if the base game was held back to accommodate a cross-gen release. Which, in all fairness, it was a necessity at the time, as it was near impossible to get hold of a PlayStation 5. World building is important in this franchise. Not only do they have to create the world Aloy lives in, the world she's fighting to save, they need to have remnants of the old world. And this time I'd say it's the old world that gets the most service here. I'll start with my negative on this. I think they fall short on padding out the Quen culture a bit. I mean, they've thrown in this whole totalitarian element with the Quen people being controlled by fear and order, and then thrown in compliance who monitor behaviour, which I couldn't help draw parallels to the Gestapo, and then this is thrown away very quickly and moves on to a cult, which ties into the main plot. I felt like anything with the Quen and their culture got blurred far too much with what was going on due to the main story. However, my positive is just the actual world as a whole. The LA we know is obviously now in ruin, and there are traces of the world that was lost, and some of the things placed in the world really hit home about the bleak reality of the end of the world. From who people spend their last few weeks with, to other people choosing to end things on their own terms, to the sacrifices of the people who are part of Operation Enduring Victory. They've combined the Vista points and the black boxes from the base game into one combined collectible, which are now air-based aerial captures, which I think works so much better. I never had the patience for the Vista points. But they don't paint a rosy picture of the last year of the old world. There's no pretty picture via the focus of what stood there before. There's no brave tales from the people in the sky fighting the machines. It's the world burning, and it's people questioning just what is Operation Enduring Victory, and what is it covering.
Pasha always said one day he'd buy a mansion with a view of the Hollywood sign. Then he died for Zero Dawn. Whatever the hell it really is.
The public couldn't know the truth. Elizabeth knew it was the only way.
Maybe I'm totally wrong, but it feels like a seed being planted. Aloy has been steadfast in continuing Elizabeth Sobek's mission to preserve humanity. Elizabeth did what she had to. Could the next game completely shake the foundation for Aloy? Could another way have been found? If Aloy doesn't have that firm belief at her core that Elizabeth did the right thing, where does that leave Aloy? I'm getting a little bit sidetracked here. Back to the aerial captures. They're an example of the developers creating situations that make you explore the world and play around with the game mechanics. Flying mounts are obviously going to be a prominent feature going forwards, and they're going to have to start gearing the side content towards that, just like they have here. The Sunwing override was an endgame perk in the base game, and most of the collectibles there had to be geared towards being on the ground and climbing rather than flying. That being said, they actually take the Sunwing away within about 5 minutes due to a tower shooting everything out of the sky. You'd feel hard done by about this, but it means you have to experience exploring the area on foot. And by water, by the new skipper boat, which actually is perfect for short-range island hopping. It also gives another way to experience the beauty of this world from a different perspective. Removing the Sunwing also acts as a plot device, of course, and you get access to it again quite quickly. And then it leads on to overriding a new machine called a Water Wing, which can both fly and travel underwater. I think it's pretty impressive going from the highest reaches of the clouds and then just nose-driving straight back down into the water. With the haptic feedback in the PlayStation 5 controller, it doesn't just look good, it feels good. So that's obviously one new gameplay addition, but we get more via the skill tree. There's things like the grapple strike and using your new weapons while gliding, and when I first unlocked them and started using them I thought, this looks awesome! But the enthusiasm did somewhat wear off when I was using the grapple strike in some encounters and thinking, this looks a little bit awkward and clunky. Look, I'm not gonna lie, I still get a thrill and feel like a total badass while I slide across the ground firing off arrows at machines. I'm a simple girl with simple gameplay needs, it seems. Though, speaking of awkward, a lot of the missions feel like that. Other than at the very start and at the end, it didn't feel like there was a lot of combat. There were a lot of slow points in the mission structure. So basically, the main antagonist, Walter Londra, is the last remaining Zenith. He wants off Earth and is planning to take a small sample of the Quen, with some of that genetic material, of course, to make his own world elsewhere away from Nemesis, where he's essentially God. To achieve this, he's created a cult, and there is a large portion of this game where you're trying to be accepted as one of Walter's chosen ones. There's a lot of wandering around and listening and talking. Wonderful as part of the world building, but in a DLC that feels a little lacking in the action department, not all that great. As a side note, I absolutely bungled this mission. All I had to do was listen and read the options, and I did it wrong. Guerrilla obviously weren't expecting anybody to screw up like this, as you then get stuck with no option to progress the story, and I had to reload from a previous save point to do it again. Don't get me wrong, there's a few attempts to shake things up a little. There's a point where you have to use a ballista to aid in climbing sections, and one of the side quests gives you a heavy weapon, and you pretty much just tear down all the burrowers in a room below you. However, on the whole, it felt slow. They've created something called Pangea World, which is based on an in-world film franchise, and I suppose the closest real-life comparison would be Harry Potter World or Disneyland. And it's a really nice idea and clever given the setting. But you go there as part of the main mission, and you're maybe only dealing with 2 enemies at a time. There wasn't a lot of challenge to it, which I found disappointing. The final battle was an ambitious spectacle, with you taking on a giant Horus machine. But again, it felt slow, awkward and clunky at times. It was a shame, as the trailer that was released before showed Aloy staring down this giant machine and firing up a Spectre weapon. And it looked like this really charged moment, and then it fell flat in the delivery. Don't want to say the gameplay was boring, but I think they played it too safe with what they added. It felt too short. There's the main mission and 3 side quests. Obviously there's a cauldron and collectibles to find, as well as a few extra arena challenges thrown in, but I felt in comparison to the Frozen Wilds DLC from the previous game, it felt short. I've briefly touched on the story, and what I've previously said just about sums it up. There's one Zenith remaining, and he wants off Earth. Because of course he does. He's self-serving and arrogant, and seems to be the embodiment of what the Zeniths were. Aloy feels like the right place for him, and especially for a cult. I don't know why. The story they give works. The side quests are simple. Go here and do that. But that was what it was like in the base game. I've never been bothered by the simplicity of those side quests because the stories they're telling are so interesting. And as much care and detail goes into the presentation as it does in the main story. They're well performed and the motion capture is just as impressive as with the main story. The best part of this DLC for me, and ironically is probably the part that would be the most decisive among players, is Aloy's personal development. Aloy's development in the base game absolutely focused on the fact that she doesn't have to do this on her own. Aloy is used to being an outcast and being on her own, but she doesn't have to fight this battle to protect humanity on her own. Considering by the end of the base game Aloy has gained Beta as a sister, I think this is the most literal on-the-nose display of you're not on your own now because she's got a clone sibling dependent on her. And there's a lot of emphasis in the DLC of Aloy not being able to do things on her own. There are parts where you need a companion to do things like hold doors open. There's a lot of focus on working together, and none of the previous reluctance we've seen from Aloy about that. It's another on-the-nose visual embodiment, this time to say, you can't do this on your own. Enter Seika, a member of the Quen and Aloy's companion for the duration of the DLC. In all the build-up to the release, there was all this hype about how Seika was unlike anybody Aloy had met before. I'll be honest, I rolled my eyes and thought, yeah, you're going to say that to build up interest in the character. But, actually, yeah, it's true. Mechanically, she functions in the same way as Erend or Katalo, or anybody else who accompanies Aloy on a mission. It's Aloy's emotional response that sets Seika apart from anybody else. There's this build-up through the DLC which goes from Aloy being curious about Seika to trying to impress her.
Up you go. Something wrong? Of course not.
To worrying about her well-being, to being nervous about seeing her.
But I gotta meet up with Seika. Talk things out with her. Make sure we're okay.
We've never seen Aloy behave like this, and I thought it was the most adorable thing to see her going through the gears of essentially having a crush. Something that has always amused me in the Horizon games is the way people fawn over Aloy once she's normally saved their lives, and she just kind of doesn't acknowledge it or downplays it for the most part. King Avad quite literally offered her the whole Sun Kingdom, and Aloy just kind of awkwardly goes, yeah, I'm gonna head to the Forbidden West now. Bye! The ending will probably have a lot of people up in arms because the first official romance option in this series is a woman. And some people will be shouting about wokeness, and these people really need to get over it. Obviously it doesn't bother me that it's a woman, loving the queer representation, but there was a part of me that probably would have wanted there to be no romantic options. I don't think we have enough stories where a character has a driving force other than a love interest. Why couldn't Aloy just have continued this mission to continue Elizabeth's work and have her found family and her clone sister? Like I've previously stated, sometimes Aloy is totally oblivious to romantic interest from other characters. Could we not have continued that? My biggest bugbears about the whole thing are firstly, it's hidden away in DLC, and on top of that, the DLC content is only available on PS5. Secondly, it bothers me that it's a choice. While none of the emotional responses are an outright no, Aloy never ever outright says that there isn't some sort of connection between them. It feels like a bit of a cheat to take away an outright romantic resolution to the whole situation, when it felt like they've been building up to it the entire story. The more measured response from Aloy was actually a good choice in the sense it seemed like the most Aloy response of all of them. It was kind of, I'm not ready for this yet, which makes sense, she's just started letting people in after all.
Ever since I was an outcast, I've been fighting. Machines, AI, Zenith, even whole tribes, it's all I know. And the truth is, Even though I've been fighting for people, good people. I've only just begun to understand them. For a long time, I barely knew how to make a friend. And now this, I
feel like they should have stuck the landing on the whole thing and just gone for a fixed outcome with the romance option. All the dialogue and the lead up seemed to indicate that this is where the developers were going anyway. When it's a choice, it instantly means it's not necessarily the canon ending to that story. The dialogue choices in the Horizon games don't have impact on how the story plays out, so it all seems a little bit of a throwaway piece of development for me. It feels like this whole situation is setting up for romance options in the next game. Actually, come to mention it, a lot of the DLC feels like that. It feels like it was gearing up for a lot of things. Moving to a PlayStation 5 only release, moving towards flying being a much larger part of the gameplay, setting up potential relationships, Beta's role as tech support at the base. And as a side note, I love Beta, I wish she'd featured more, especially as there was at least one cutscene at the base. Speaking of that cutscene, it of course featured Silence, who was voiced by the late Lance Reddick, in what was probably one of his last roles. The epilogue felt like it was potentially setting up what Silent's role would have been in the next game, which you have to assume is all up in the air now. However, knowing it's the last time Lance Reddick will voice Silence, it was actually quite a touching last interaction with Aloy.
Aloy, Nemesis is not a threat that can be defeated single-handedly. I am grateful for your extraordinary contributions.
So what do I think of Burning Shores overall? It looks stunning, and it's amazing exploring the world, but I do think some of that covers the fact that there's just not a lot to the story or the side quests. I thought something very similar about the base game. The stunning visuals somewhat distracted from the fact that most of the side content was just random collectibles. But you know what? I'm one of those people who can get a lot of enjoyment out of photo mode, so that's kind of okay. For the length of it, I thought the story was enjoyable and quite fitting for the setting. I did appreciate the character development that Aloy got, and that's probably up there as one of my high points, even if it's hidden away in DLC and will have no bearing on a future game. So, how long do I have to wait for that? I don't think photo mode can distract me that long. Thanks for watching. I know it's been a while. The channel is kind of a passion project. I don't earn anything from this, so I do have a full-time job and a life to keep on track. I'd love to be able to dedicate more time to creating content because I really do enjoy sharing my opinions on games and creating videos. Before Burning Shores was released, I'd started making some notes for a much longer and detailed analysis of Aloy's character, which is why I've held back on some of my opinions here. I'd like to think that's what my next video would be. I mean, at the rate I'm going, it'll be in about a year's time. With that being said, if you want to find out what I have to say on Aloy's character, or if you just want to be notified to see if I actually do it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you've liked the video, hit the like button, and as always, I'll be back soon with another video.